She was not looking for love when she found him. She had actually reached a place where she had stopped looking, where she had decided, quietly, privately, without telling anyone, that maybe the kind of love she had always imagined was not real, that maybe the intensity she felt she was capable of giving and receiving existed only in stories and not in actual human relationships. And then he appeared, and he was everything, not in the vague, general way that people say someone is everything, in the specific, precise, almost uncanny way that felt like the universe had read the private list she had never written down and sent her exactly what was on it. He remembered things, small things, the kind of things that people say they will remember and then forget. He brought them back to her like gifts. He asked questions that went deeper than anyone had ever gone. He seemed to understand her wounds without her having to explain them. He liked what she liked. He believed what she believed. He was patient where she needed patience. He was passionate where she needed passion. It felt like recognition, like coming home to a place she had never been. And she thought, finally, after everything, finally I have found my person. She had not found her person. She had found her predator. And the most devastating thing about what happened next is not what he did to her. It is that she never saw it coming. Not because she was naive, not because she was foolish, not because something was wrong with her ability to read people or protect herself, but because what she encountered was not ordinary manipulation. It was a system, a precise, practiced, psychologically sophisticated system that had been refined through use on other people before her. A system designed specifically to find the person who would never suspect it and give them the exact experience that would make suspicion impossible. She was not a victim of chance. She was a target of skill. And today we are going to go somewhere that most videos in this space never go. We are going to go inside the mind of the predator. Not to excuse what was done, not to generate sympathy for someone who caused extraordinary harm, but because understanding how a predator thinks, what they look for, how they operate, what the process actually looks like from their side, is the most powerful protection that any person can have, because you cannot protect yourself from something you do not understand. And after this video, you will understand it completely. Before we go further, I want to plant 4 questions in your mind. Questions that belong to everyone who has ever looked back on a relationship and felt the specific horror of realizing that what felt like destiny was actually design. How does a predator identify their target? What are they actually looking for? What is happening in their mind during the love bombing phase while you are falling in love? Why do they eventually stop the performance? What changes and when? And the question that haunts every survivor of this kind of abuse: was any of it ever real, or was all of it calculated from the very first moment? Hold every one of those questions. They will all be answered before this video ends. And the answer to that last one, the one that cuts deepest, is more complicated and more important than you might expect. Now I need to take you somewhere uncomfortable. I need to take you inside the mind of a person who is capable of doing what was done to her, to the person who studied her and performed for her and built a relationship that felt to her like the most real thing she had ever experienced while being, on his side, something entirely different. This is not a comfortable place to go, but it is a necessary one. Because the first thing you need to understand about predatory narcissistic behavior is that it does not look the way most people imagine it looks. Most people, when they imagine someone capable of deliberately targeting and manipulating another person, imagine someone cold, someone visibly calculating, someone whose lack of genuine warmth is detectable from the outside, someone who makes them feel uncomfortable in ways they can name. The predator in this story does not look like that. He does not feel like that. He feels warm, interested, emotionally intelligent, perceptive in ways that feel almost supernatural, caring in ways that feel more genuine than anything you have experienced before. Because here is the most important thing to understand about how predatory narcissism actually operates. The performance is not separate from the person. The warmth that he performs is not experienced by him as performance. The interest he displays is not experienced by him as false. The connection that he creates is not registered in his own mind as manufactured. It is all filtered through a psychology that is so fundamentally different from ordinary human psychology that applying normal emotional logic to it produces conclusions that are completely wrong. A predatory narcissist does not experience their targets the way ordinary people experience the people they are with. They experience targets the way a craftsperson experiences material, with genuine interest, with focused attention, with something that from the inside might even feel like appreciation. But it is the appreciation of a person who sees what something is useful for, not the appreciation of a person who sees what something is worth. And that distinction, between being seen for your usefulness and being seen for your worth, is the distinction between what she thought was happening and what was actually happening from the very first conversation. Now let us talk about what the predator is actually doing in those early stages, because understanding the process from his side is what finally makes the experience from her side make complete sense. Before he ever began the performance, before the first intense conversation, before the first extraordinary gesture, before the first moment that felt like finally being truly seen, he was watching. This watching phase is something that survivors almost never know about because it happens before there is anything to look back on, before the relationship had even begun in any formal sense, before she had any reason to be paying attention to what he was doing. He was watching who she was in her unguarded moments, how she interacted with people around her, what seemed to light her up, what seemed to carry weight for her, how she responded to kindness, how she responded to difficulty, whether she was someone who gave people the benefit of the doubt, whether she was someone who prioritized other people's comfort over her own, whether she was someone who had been hurt before and was carrying that hurt in visible ways that told him exactly where the openings were. He was not watching to know her. He was watching to build a profile that told him what she needed, what she had been missing, what the right person would give her, what words would land in the places that were empty, what gestures would feel like finally being understood. And once the profile was complete, once he had gathered enough raw material, he began to construct the person she needed him to be, not randomly, not approximately, with surgical precision. The things he remembered that seemed to indicate a supernatural attentiveness were not evidence of genuine interest. They were outputs of the profiling process. He remembered them because they were data points, because they told him something about who she was and what she needed and how to make her feel more deeply seen. The questions he asked that went deeper than anyone had ever gone were not evidence of emotional depth. They were intelligence gathering. Each answer she gave was additional material for the construction. Each vulnerability she revealed was a tool he filed away for the performance and, later, for the devaluation. The perfect understanding he seemed to have of her wounds was not evidence of empathy. It was evidence of skilled reading. Narcissistic predators are often extraordinarily good at reading people, not because they feel deeply, but because they observe carefully. Because their attention, when it is focused on a target, is not filtered through their own emotional responses the way most people's attention is. They see clearly because they are not moved, and what they see clearly, they use. Now let us talk about what is happening on his side during the love bombing phase itself, because this is the part that survivors find most difficult to understand and most painful to process. When he was performing the extraordinary attentiveness, when he was saying the things that landed so perfectly, when he was creating the experiences that felt like nothing she had ever felt before, what was he feeling? The honest answer is more complicated than most people want to hear. He was not feeling nothing. Predatory narcissists are not emotionless. They experience something. During the love bombing phase, there is a genuine engagement, a focus, an interest, something that from the inside might register as excitement or even something resembling affection. But what they are engaged with is not the person. They are engaged with the performance, with the skill of what they are doing, with the feedback that tells them the performance is working, with the particular satisfaction that comes from watching someone respond to them in exactly the way they intended, with the confirmation of their own ability to control another person's emotional experience. What registers as exciting to them is not her, it is their effect on her. This is a distinction that is almost impossible to communicate to someone who experiences human connection the way most people do. Because for most people, their interest in another person and their interest in how that person responds to them are not separable. They care about the other person, and so they care about how the other person feels. For the predatory narcissist, they are entirely separable. The interest in her response is completely disconnected from any genuine interest in her as a person. She was the medium through which the performance happened, not the reason for it. Now I want to talk about something that is essential for understanding why the performance eventually ends. Because one of the most painful and confusing moments in every survivor's experience is the moment when the person who seemed to know them so completely began to withdraw that knowing, when the warmth disappeared, when the extraordinary attentiveness became indifference or cruelty, when the person who felt more real than anyone she had ever known suddenly became unrecognizable. Why does that happen? The answer is one of the most important things I will say in this entire video. The performance ends because it was never sustainable, not because his feelings changed, not because she did something wrong, not because the love that felt so real somehow ran out, because maintaining a high investment performance requires a return that justifies the investment. In the early phase of the relationship, the return was high. Her response to the performance, the depth of her attachment, the intensity of her investment, the willingness to give him everything he needed, was rewarding enough to justify the energy the performance required. But as the bond deepened and her attachment became more secure, he made a calculation that most survivors never know was made. He calculated that the bond was now strong enough that the performance was no longer necessary to maintain her investment, that she was now sufficiently attached that he could begin to reduce the performance, and she would remain. Not because she was weak, because the bond that had been created was real on her side, even if it was manufactured on his. Because the neurochemical dependency that the love bombing had created was genuine, even if the love that created it was not. Because leaving someone who has been your entire world for months or years is one of the hardest things a human being can do, even when you know intellectually that you should. He knew all of this. He had calculated it. And the withdrawal of the performance was not a mistake or a moment of carelessness. It was the transition to the next phase of a process that had always been designed to end up exactly where it ended up. Now I want to talk about something that goes even deeper than the mechanics of the process. Something about the psychology of the predator that most people never have explained to them, and that changes everything about how survivors understand what happened. Why does someone become capable of this? Not as an excuse, not as a way of generating sympathy that was not earned, but because understanding the origin of predatory behavior is what finally allows you to stop asking a question that has no answer. The question of what you did wrong. The answer to why someone becomes capable of treating another human being as material rather than as a person almost always begins very early. In a childhood where genuine emotional connection was either absent or punishing, where being seen for who you actually were produced not warmth but danger, where learning to read other people and give them what they needed was a survival strategy rather than an expression of care. The predatory patterns that feel so calculated and so deliberate in adulthood began as adaptations, as a child's attempt to navigate an environment where genuine vulnerability was not safe, where the only way to get needs met was through performance and manipulation, because authenticity produced rejection or harm. This does not make what was done acceptable. It does not reduce the pain of what she experienced, but it does answer a question that survivors carry in silence. Was I just unlucky? Or is there something wrong with me for attracting this? Neither. What you attracted was someone who was very good at identifying and responding to exactly the qualities you possess. Someone whose particular skill set had been developed over a lifetime precisely to find and bind people with your capacity for love, your openness, your willingness to believe in the best of another person. You were not unlucky in the random sense. You were targeted in the specific sense. And the difference between those two things is everything. Because being targeted by someone skilled at targeting people with your qualities is not evidence of a flaw in you. It is evidence of a quality in you that was exploited. Now let us talk about something that every survivor of this kind of relationship eventually has to face. The moment when you look back at everything, every conversation, every gesture, every moment that felt like the most real thing you had ever experienced, and you try to determine what was real and what was performed. This process is one of the most psychologically painful things a survivor goes through, because everything that felt most real is now suspect. Every memory is now filtered through the knowledge of what was actually happening on his side. Every moment that felt like genuine connection now has to be re-examined for what it actually was, and the re-examination feels like losing the relationship twice. once when it ended and once when you realize what it was. But I want to say something about this re-examination that is important. Not everything you experienced was false. The feelings you had were real. Your love was real. Your hope was real. The connection you felt, even though it was one-directional, was a real experience of your genuine capacity for depth and intimacy. What was not real was the source of it. But the experience itself, what happened inside you, that was completely, entirely, 100% authentic. And that matters, because some survivors come out of this kind of relationship believing that their capacity for love is broken, that the fact that they loved someone who was not real means that their love was not real, that they are not capable of genuine connection because they were deceived about whether the connection they felt was mutual. None of that is true. Your love was real. It was given to someone who was not capable of receiving it. That is not a failure of your love. It is a tragedy of their psychology. And the extraordinary capacity for connection that made you such a compelling target, the depth, the openness, the willingness to love without reservation, is not something to be ashamed of. It is the most valuable thing about you, and it deserves to be given to someone who is capable of receiving it honestly. Now, I promised you 4 answers to the 4 questions I planted at the beginning of this video. Here they are. The first question was, how does a predator identify their target? What are they actually looking for? They are looking for a specific psychological profile that maximizes the return on their investment of performance. They look for warmth and openness, people who lead with their heart and are willing to trust. They look for empathy, people who are moved by others' pain and who will extend benefit of the doubt and work to understand difficult behavior. They look for unmet needs, people who have been hurt before and who carry specific emotional absences that the performance can be tailored to fill. They look for loyalty, people who, once attached, will remain even through difficulty because their values include commitment and their psychology includes the ability to explain away bad behavior through love. They are not looking for weakness. They are looking for specific strengths that can be exploited. Your warmth, your empathy, your loyalty, these are not the reasons you were targeted in the sense of being flaws. They are the reasons you were targeted in the sense of being the precise qualities that made the performance worth performing. The second question was, what is happening in their mind during the love bombing phase while you are falling in love? They are engaged, but not with you in the way you were engaged with them. They are engaged with the performance, with the feedback that confirms the performance is working, with the satisfaction of controlling another person's emotional experience with skill and precision. There is something that registers as excitement or engagement, but it is directed at what they are doing, not at who you are. The profile they built of you is what they are responding to, giving back to you the exact version of connection your profile indicated you needed, not the actual person you are beneath the profile, which is why the relationship, despite its extraordinary intimacy, always had a quality of being slightly about them even when it seemed entirely about you. Because it was. The performance was always about demonstrating their skill. You were the canvas, not the artist. The third question was, why do they eventually stop the performance? What changes and when? The performance stops when the calculation changes, when the attachment bond is strong enough that maintaining the full investment of the performance is no longer necessary to sustain the return. This is experienced by survivors as the person changing, as the warmth disappearing, as the attentiveness fading, as the extraordinary understanding being replaced by indifference or cruelty. But the person has not changed. The investment level has changed because the bond is now strong enough that a lower investment produces the same return. The devaluation that follows is not random or reactive. It is the next phase of a process, and it is designed to produce the specific psychological effect of making you work harder to earn back what you had, which increases your investment and dependency while decreasing his effort. The power dynamic reverses completely, and it was always heading there from the very first conversation. The fourth question, was any of it ever real, or was all of it calculated from the very first moment? This is the question that hurts most and deserves the most honest answer. On his side, the interest was real, but it was interest in a project, not in a person. The engagement was real, but it was engagement with a performance, not with you. The warmth was real, but it was the warmth of someone who is good at something and enjoys being good at it, not the warmth of someone who sees your value and is moved by it. So in that sense, no. What felt like love was not love. What felt like being known was being profiled. What felt like destiny was design. But, and this is the part that matters for your healing, on your side, every single thing was real. Your love was real. Your hope was real. Your belief in what you had was real. Your capacity for the kind of connection you thought you were having is absolutely real. None of what happened on your side was false. You did not love a fiction. You loved with complete authenticity and were deceived about whether that love was being received the way love is supposed to be received. That is not the same as your love being unreal. Your love was the most real thing in the entire relationship, and it still is, and it will find somewhere worthy of it. Let me leave you with this. She thought she found her person, and she did not find her person. She found someone who had studied how to become what her person would look and feel like, without any of the substance that made the appearance worth having, and that is a devastating thing to discover. But here is what I need you to hear in the silence after that devastation. The fact that you were targeted does not diminish you. It reveals something about the quality of what you carry, about the depth of your capacity for love, about the warmth and openness and loyalty that made you worth the investment of the most sophisticated manipulation he knew how to perform. You were not targeted because you were easy. You were targeted because you were extraordinary. And somewhere on the other side of what you have been through, on the other side of the grief and the re-examination and the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust in your own perceptions, there is a version of you that knows this, that has processed what happened well enough to no longer define yourself by it, that has reclaimed the capacity for love that was exploited and directed it towards someone who is actually capable of receiving it. That looks back on the person who thought she had found her person and feels not shame but compassion, because she was doing what humans do. She was loving. And that is never the wrong thing to do. It was just given to the wrong person. Subscribe to this channel because every week we go deeper into the psychology of predatory relationships, narcissistic abuse, healing, and what it truly means to find your way back to yourself and to genuine love after someone used your capacity for it against you. And remember this, she thought she found her person. She did not. But her person exists, and everything she survived has made her more capable of recognizing him when he arrives, not less.